Now in your next one, we are going to use your 8.5 and your 8.6 notes to help you remember how to factor completely. We're going to focus on trinomials with these, and we're going to focus on the largest exponent being a squared. So first what we're going to do is I'm going to have you, this is the IXL, I'm going to go through a couple of problems just from here. We'll do them on our board here, but I'll just show you the IXL questions. So we have q squared plus 9q plus 14. The first thing you always want to do is look for the GCF. Okay, see if there is anything that all three terms have in common. So I have q squared, 9q, and 14. So remember there's a 1 here, 1, 9, and 14. Nothing that they have in common for numbers. Q squared, q to the first, and no q's, which means since this one doesn't have any, they don't have any q's in common either. So no GCF for this. Now, what you're going to do is make sure that you know the a, b, and c values. Remember, a is the number in front of the x squared, or in our case, q squared. B is the number in front of the x, or in our case, q, and c is your constant. And pay attention to negatives if you have any, if this is minus 14 or if this is minus 9. And remember that the number in front of your q squared, if there isn't one, is a 1. Then what you're going to do is you're going to take the a value times the c value. So we're going to multiply these two. 1 times 14 is 14. This is where you now can use Desmos. You need two numbers that multiply to be whatever you just got, and two numbers that add to be that middle value, which in our case is 9. So you can go and type this into Desmos. So I want x times y to be 14, and x plus y to equal 9. Remember, you come over to see where they intersect. If they have two intersections, they should still be the same, just opposite, 7 and 2, 2 and 7. So then you're going to have two sets of parentheses. Your variable, make sure you have the correct variable, goes first in both set of parentheses. Then your two numbers you just found, 2 and 7. One goes in the first one, the other one goes in the second one. Then you would divide both of these by a. Our case though, a is 1. Dividing this by 1 doesn't change anything, so this is your answer. You just get to stop right there. So going back to the IXL, I have q plus 2 times q plus 7. Make sure you're using the correct variables. That is your answer. Okay, next problem says we have 2y squared minus 44y minus 46. So when we come back here, let's go ahead and get that copied down. We've got 2y squared minus 44y minus 46. You always have to look for a GCF first. So if you look at your numbers, 2, 44, and 46, they are all divisible by 2. I have y squared, y, and no y's, which means no variables that are in common. So now you're going to factor your GCF like you just did. So divide it all by 2. So 2y squared divided by 2 is just y squared. Negative 44y divided by 2 is negative 22y. And negative 46 divided by 2 is negative 23. Okay. Now at this point, this number in front just hangs out. He doesn't do anything. So your next step was to identify A, B, and C. A is the number right in front of your y squared term, not your number, your GCF you factored out. The number right here, which there isn't one, so A for me is 1. B is negative 22, and C is negative 23. So we're going to multiply your A and C. Then we're going to use Desmos. We need two numbers that multiplies to be that answer and adds to be B, which is negative 22. So I can go to Desmos and type that in. I have x times y is supposed to be negative 23, and x plus y is supposed to be negative 22. Move this so I can find my answers. Here's where they intersect at 1 and negative 23. Okay, this number stays in front. Then I have two sets of parentheses. Your variable is first in both of them. And then your two numbers you just found on Desmos are second for both of them, positive 1 and negative 23. Then you would divide these numbers by A. Our case A is 1, so it doesn't change anything here. So this is your answer. 2 and then y plus 1 times y minus 23. That's all you have to do in all these IXLs. I will go through a couple more problems in the video if you need to see them, but you can stop the video and try your IXLs if you would like to. Okay, those of you who want to go through another example, we now have 2p squared minus 20p plus 42. You always start with GCF. You've got 2, negative 20, and 42. They can all be divided by 2. P squared, P and nothing, which means no P's in common, so your GCF is just 2. 2p squared divided by 2 is p squared. Negative 20p divided by 2 is negative 10p. And 42 divided by 2 is 21. Now you ignore the GCF that you just factored out. Find A, B, and C. Remember, A is the number in front of p squared. B is the number in front of p, and C is your constant. Multiply A and C. 1 times 21 is 21. You need two numbers that multiply to be that answer, and add to be the B value, which is negative 10. You go to Desmos. Two numbers that multiplies to be 21, and adds to be negative 10. Find your two numbers, which are negative 3 and negative 7. So GCF remains out front. Two sets of parentheses. Variables first in both. Your two numbers are next that you found from Desmos. Our two numbers are negative 3 and negative 7. So negative 3 and negative 7. You would divide by A. In our case, A is 1. Dividing by 1 doesn't change anything, so there's your answer. So 2 p minus 3 times p minus 7. One more example, and then you should be able to continue on your own. G squared plus 10g plus 16. G squared plus 10g plus 16. Always start with GCF. I've got 1g squared plus 10g plus 16. 1, 10, and 16. That's just a 1, so that means nothing in common. G squared, G, and no G, so nothing in common, so no GCF. So now just identify A is 1, B is 10, C is 16. Multiply A and C. You need two numbers that multiply to be that answer and add to be B, which is 10. So go back to Desmos. They need to multiply to be 16, add to be positive 10. Where they cross are 8 and 2. two sets of parentheses, variable first in both. Your two numbers you just found in the second, we had 2 and 8. We saw from here 2 and 8, or 8 and 2, doesn't matter the order. You would divide by a, in our case a is 1, so you don't need to divide by anything, you stop there. So we get v plus 2 times g plus 8.